In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of tradition echo through marble corridors, a single gesture would redefine the future of the British monarchy. It wasn't a crown that sparked whispers throughout the royal circles, nor a ceremonial sword that divided loyalties. It was a delicate tiara, adorned with diamonds that had witnessed the reign of the longest-serving monarch in British history, that would leave one queen consort speechless and elevate another to unprecedented heights. The late Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection of tiaras represented more than mere jewelry. Each piece carried the weight of history, the memories of state dinners, the sparkle of diplomatic triumphs, and the silent strength of a woman who wore them with unmatched grace for over 70 years. When King Charles III made his decision about who would inherit his mother's most treasured pieces, the reverberations would be felt from the private apartments of the palace to the front pages of newspapers worldwide. This is the story of how a single moment of royal favor transformed relationships, challenged expectations, and revealed the true dynamics of power within the most watched family on earth. It's about tradition meeting modernity, about a stepmother's surprise and a daughter-in-law's quiet triumph, and about how sometimes the most profound statements are made not with words, but with the careful placement of diamonds upon a deserving head. The morning light filtered through the ancient windows of Windsor Castle as King Charles III stood alone in his mother's former private study. The room remained largely unchanged since Queen Elizabeth II's passing, her personal effects carefully preserved as if waiting for her return. On the mahogany desk sat several velvet-lined boxes, each containing treasures that had adorned the Queen's head during the most significant moments of her remarkable reign. Charles ran his fingers along the edge of the largest box, knowing well what lay within. The decision he was about to make had been weighing heavily on his mind for months. As the new monarch, he understood that every choice carried symbolic weight, every gesture would be analyzed and interpreted by courtiers, media, and the public alike. But this particular decision felt more personal than most. The collection before him represented his mother's most cherished tiaras, pieces she had worn not just for state occasions but for family celebrations, private dinners, and quiet moments when she wanted to feel the connection to the generations of queens who had come before her. There was the George IV state diadem, with its roses, thistles, and shamrocks representing the unity of the kingdom. The diamond diadem had crowned her head on countless stamps and banknotes, becoming as recognizable as her smile. And then, there was her personal favorite, the one she had chosen to wear on her wedding day and had requested for numerous intimate family gatherings thereafter. Charles had always been acutely aware of his mother's relationships with the women who had married into their family. He had witnessed her initial reservations about Diana, followed by genuine affection and, later, profound sadness at how that relationship had deteriorated. He had seen her cautious acceptance of Camilla, a woman who had loved him through decades of public scrutiny and private heartache. And he had observed with growing admiration her embrace of Catherine, the young woman who had brought such joy to his son William and had adapted to royal life with remarkable grace and dignity. The question of inheritance had become particularly complex since his mother's death. Traditionally, such personal items would pass to the spouse of the reigning monarch. Camilla, now queen consort, had every right to expect that these precious pieces would become hers to wear and, eventually, pass down. She had waited patiently through years of being the other woman, then, the much criticized second wife, and, finally, the accepted queen consort. Surely, protocol dictated that these symbols of queenly authority should rest upon her head. But Charles found himself thinking beyond mere protocol. He thought about legacy, about the future of the monarchy, and about what his mother would have truly wanted. Queen Elizabeth II had been a master of subtle communication through her choice of jewelry and clothing. Every brooch, every necklace, every tiara had been selected to send a message, whether about diplomatic relationships, family bonds, or personal sentiments. As he opened the first box, revealing the stunning sparkle of perfectly cut diamonds set in platinum, Charles reflected on his observations of both women over the past few years. Camilla had certainly grown into her role, handling public duties with increasing confidence and winning over many who had once viewed her with suspicion. She understood the weight of royal responsibility and had supported him through the most challenging period of his life. Yet it was Catherine who seemed to embody something his mother had particularly valued. The young Princess of Wales carried herself with a natural elegance that reminded many observers of Queen Elizabeth II in her younger years. She had an innate understanding of the balance between accessibility and majesty, between being relatable to the public while maintaining the mystique essential to the monarchy's survival. Charles remembered the conversations he had shared with his mother about the future of the crown. Queen Elizabeth II had often spoken about the importance of preparing the monarchy for generations to come, about ensuring that traditions evolved appropriately while maintaining their essential meaning. She had expressed particular confidence in William and Catherine's ability to modernize the institution while respecting its core values. The king also recalled the private moments he had witnessed between his mother and Catherine. There had been a special warmth in their relationship, a mutual respect that had grown stronger with each passing year. The Queen had taken particular pleasure in Catherine's approach to motherhood, her dedication to causes that mattered, and her ability to navigate the complexities of royal life without losing her authentic self. Standing in that quiet room, surrounded by centuries of royal history, Charles began to understand that his decision about the tiaras represented more than just the distribution of valuable jewelry. It was about signaling the direction he intended to take the monarchy, about honoring his mother's vision for the future, and about recognizing the woman who would one day wear the crown alongside his son. He thought about Camilla's reaction to what he was considering. She had always been remarkably gracious about understanding her position within the family hierarchy. Despite becoming queen consort, she had never sought to overshadow William and Catherine or to claim a prominence that might have created awkward tensions. Her wisdom in navigating these relationships had been one of her greatest contributions to the family's stability. The decision crystallized in his mind as he lifted the most significant tiara from its resting place. This was not about diminishing Camilla's role or showing favoritism in a petty family dispute. This was about recognizing the future queen consort, about preparing Catherine for the responsibilities that would one day be hers, and about honoring what he believed his mother's wishes would have been. Charles knew that when he announced his decision, it would send ripples throughout the royal household and beyond. Courtiers would analyze every aspect of the choice, searching for deeper meanings and implications. The media would seize upon any hint of family drama or shifting power dynamics. But he also knew that sometimes a king must make decisions based on wisdom rather than convention, on long-term vision rather than immediate expectations. As he prepared to leave the study, Charles took one last look at his mother's portrait hanging above the fireplace. Queen Elizabeth II gazed back at him with the serene confidence that had characterized her entire reign. In that moment, he felt certain that she would have approved of his choice. The tiaras would go where they could best serve the future of the monarchy she had devoted her life to protecting and nurturing. The stage was set for a moment that would surprise many, disappoint some, and ultimately reveal the thoughtful leadership style that Charles intended to bring to his reign. The ancient tradition of royal inheritance was about to meet the practical realities of a modern monarchy, and the result would reshape the dynamics within the House of Windsor in ways that no one could have fully anticipated. The news reached Camilla during her morning tea in the private sitting room she had made her own since becoming queen consort. She had been reviewing the schedule for an upcoming charity event when her private secretary knocked quietly on the door, his expression carefully neutral in the way that palace staff perfected when delivering potentially sensitive information. "Your Majesty," he began with the formal tone reserved for official communications, "His Majesty requests your presence in the blue drawing room at your earliest convenience. There is a matter of some importance he wishes to discuss regarding the late Queen's personal effects." Camilla set down her delicate china cup with practiced composure, though something in her secretary's demeanor suggested this was not a routine administrative matter. She had been expecting this conversation for some time. The question of Queen Elizabeth II's personal jewelry collection had been hovering in the background of palace discussions since the funeral, though she had deliberately avoided raising the subject herself. Years of navigating royal protocols had taught her the wisdom of patience, particularly when it came to matters that might be perceived as grasping or presumptuous. As she made her way through the familiar corridors of the palace, Camilla reflected on her journey to this moment. The transition from the most vilified woman in Britain to queen consort had been neither swift nor easy. Every step had required careful consideration, every public appearance had been scrutinized for evidence of overreach or inappropriate ambition. She had learned to measure her expectations, to find satisfaction in gradual acceptance rather than immediate embrace. The blue drawing room had been the site of many significant royal announcements and private family discussions over the years. Its formal elegance, with walls adorned in silk damask and furnished with priceless antiques, seemed appropriate for conversations about the future of treasured royal heirlooms. When Camilla entered, she found Charles standing near the tall windows, his silhouette framed against the palace gardens where tourists gathered daily, hoping for a glimpse of royal life. "You wanted to see me about the Queen's jewelry," she said, her voice carrying the direct approach that had become her trademark. Years of avoiding the circuitous communication style sometimes favored in royal circles had served her well, and Charles had always appreciated her straightforward manner. Charles turned to face her, and she immediately noticed the careful way he had positioned himself, the formal tone of his posture that suggested this was not simply a casual conversation between husband and wife. On the ornate table nearby, she could see several of the distinctive red Morocco leather boxes that had housed Queen Elizabeth II's most precious pieces. "I've been giving considerable thought to the distribution of my mother's personal collection," he began, his words measured and deliberate. "As you know, these pieces represent more than valuable jewelry. They carry the history of the monarchy and the personal memories of her reign." Camilla nodded, maintaining her composure while preparing herself for whatever decision he had reached. She had long ago learned that in royal life, disappointments were best received with dignity, and victories were most graceful when accepted without excessive celebration. The skill of reading between carefully chosen words had become second nature to her. "I have decided," Charles continued, "that certain pieces from the collection should go to Catherine. The tiara my mother wore on her wedding day, in particular, seems most appropriate for the future queen consort." The words hung in the air between them, their full implications slowly settling into Camilla's understanding. She felt a complex mixture of emotions wash over her, surprise being perhaps the most immediate. She had not expected Charles to bypass the traditional progression of royal inheritance, though she recognized the logic behind his reasoning even as she processed her own reaction to it. For a moment, Camilla found herself genuinely speechless, a rare occurrence for someone who had developed considerable skill in navigating difficult conversations. The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of unspoken questions and implications. She understood immediately that this was not a decision made lightly or without consideration for her feelings, but it was still unexpected enough to require a moment of adjustment. "I see," she finally managed, her voice steady despite the surprise she felt. Years of public scrutiny had taught her to control her immediate reactions, to process complex emotions privately before responding. "And you believe this is the most appropriate choice for the future of the monarchy?" It was not quite a question, but rather an invitation for Charles to explain his reasoning more fully. Camilla had learned that direct confrontation rarely served her well in royal contexts, but thoughtful inquiry could often lead to productive discussions about difficult decisions. Charles recognized both the grace and the underlying questions in her response. He moved closer, his formal stance softening slightly as he prepared to share the deeper considerations that had guided his choice. The conversation they were about to have would test the strength of their relationship and their shared commitment to the institution they both served. "Camilla, you must understand that this decision reflects my vision for the continuity of the crown," he explained, his tone becoming more personal. "Catherine will one day need to wear these pieces with the authority and confidence that my mother possessed. The earlier she begins to establish that connection with the public and with the symbols of queenship, the stronger the monarchy will be when William ascends to the throne." She listened carefully, recognizing the practical wisdom in his words while still processing her own complex feelings about being passed over for what many would have considered her due as the current queen consort. The rational part of her mind understood the long-term strategic thinking behind his choice, even as the more personal part of her felt the sting of what could be perceived as a slight. "I want you to know that this in no way diminishes my respect for your role or your contributions," Charles continued, clearly aware that his decision required careful explanation. "You have brought dignity and service to your position in ways that have exceeded even my highest expectations. This is not about worthiness or hierarchy within our family." Camilla appreciated his attempt to soften the impact of his decision, though she also recognized that royal life often required accepting disappointments with grace, particularly when they served larger purposes. She had spent years learning to find satisfaction in her supporting role, understanding that her greatest contributions to the monarchy might not always be publicly recognized or traditionally rewarded. The conversation continued with the careful diplomacy that characterized many royal family discussions about sensitive matters. Charles outlined his broader vision for preparing William and Catherine for their eventual roles, while Camilla gradually came to terms with a decision that, while personally disappointing, made sense within the context of monarchical succession planning. By the time their discussion concluded, Camilla had managed to process her initial surprise and respond with the graciousness that had become her trademark. She understood that her role in the family required supporting decisions that served the institution's long-term interests, even when those decisions meant personal sacrifice or disappointment. The news would soon reach Catherine, who would face her own complex emotions about receiving such significant tokens of royal inheritance earlier than protocol might have suggested. The ripple effects of Charles's decision would be felt throughout the royal household, as staff members and family members alike tried to understand the implications of this departure from traditional expectations. As Camilla left the blue drawing room, she carried herself with the dignity that had served her well throughout her gradual acceptance into the royal family. The surprise had been genuine, the disappointment real, but her commitment to supporting the monarchy's future remained unwavering. The tiaras would go to Catherine, and Camilla would find her own ways to contribute to the crown's legacy. Catherine was reviewing her children's school schedules in the comfortable study of Adelaide Cottage when William entered with an expression she had learned to recognize over their years of marriage. It was the look he wore when royal duties intersected with personal life in unexpected ways, requiring careful navigation of family dynamics and public expectations. "My father would like to see us both this afternoon," William said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "It concerns something that belonged to Granny, something he believes should come to us now rather than wait for the future." Catherine looked up from the papers scattered before her, immediately understanding that this was not a routine family matter. The careful way William had phrased his words, the formal undertone despite their private setting, suggested that whatever King Charles wanted to discuss carried significant weight beyond their personal family circle. Since Queen Elizabeth II's passing, Catherine had often found herself thinking about the legacy of the remarkable woman who had guided the monarchy through 7 decades of unprecedented change. The late Queen had been not just a sovereign but a mentor, someone who had helped Catherine understand the delicate balance between personal authenticity and royal duty. Their relationship had grown from initial formality to genuine warmth, marked by small gestures and quiet conversations that had meant more to Catherine than any grand public recognition. The drive to Windsor Castle that afternoon felt different from their usual family visits. There was an anticipatory tension in the air, a sense that whatever King Charles wanted to discuss would mark another transition in their evolving roles within the royal family. Catherine had learned to approach such moments with a mixture of openness and caution, understanding that royal life often presented opportunities that came with complex responsibilities. They found King Charles waiting in the same room where he had earlier spoken with Camilla, though the atmosphere was notably different. The red Morocco boxes remained on the ornate table, but Charles appeared more relaxed, more confident in the conversation he was about to have. This was not a difficult decision being explained to someone who might be disappointed, but rather a meaningful gift being offered to those he believed would best honor its significance. "I wanted to speak with you both about some of my mother's most treasured possessions," Charles began, his tone warm but formal enough to convey the importance of the moment. "These pieces represent not just valuable jewelry, but the continuity of the monarchy and the personal legacy of a queen who devoted her life to service." Catherine felt her heart rate quicken as she began to understand the direction of the conversation. She glanced at William, who maintained his composed expression while clearly processing the implications of his father's words. They had both expected that such discussions would come eventually, but the timing suggested that Charles had specific reasons for addressing the matter now. The king moved to the table and opened the largest of the leather boxes, revealing a tiara that seemed to capture all the light in the room and reflect it back in brilliant sparkles. Catherine immediately recognized it as one of Queen Elizabeth II's favorites, a piece she had worn on her wedding day and during countless significant moments throughout her reign. "This belonged to my mother, and before that to my grandmother," Charles explained, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "It has crowned the heads of queens and future queens for nearly a century. I believe it should continue that tradition with you, Catherine." The words struck Catherine with unexpected force. She had imagined this moment many times over the years, wondering what it might feel like to inherit pieces of such historical significance. But the reality of it happening now, earlier than protocol might have suggested, filled her with a complex mixture of honor, responsibility, and genuine surprise. Your Majesty, she began, using the formal address that felt appropriate for such a significant moment, I am deeply honored by your trust in me. To wear something so precious to the Queen, something that carries such history and meaning, is both a privilege and a responsibility I don't take lightly. William reached for her hand, understanding both the magnitude of the gift and the emotional impact it was having on his wife. He had seen how deeply Catherine had been affected by his grandmother's death, how she had grieved not just the loss of a sovereign but of a woman who would become a genuine mentor and friend. Charles smiled, recognizing in Catherine's response the thoughtfulness and respect that had convinced him she was the right choice for this inheritance. My mother was very fond of you, Catherine. She often spoke about your natural grace and your understanding of what the monarchy represents. She would be pleased to know these pieces will continue to serve their purpose through you. The conversation continued as Charles explained his broader thinking about the transition of royal heirlooms and the symbolic importance of connecting Catherine more formally with the legacy she would one day inherit completely. He spoke about the public's response to seeing her wear pieces with such historical significance, about the continuity it would represent, and about his confidence in her ability to honor the weight of such treasures. Catherine found herself thinking about the first time she had met Queen Elizabeth II, how nervous she had been and how graciously the Queen had put her at ease. Over the years that followed, those interactions had evolved into something much deeper than duty or protocol. The Queen had become someone Catherine could turn to for advice, someone who understood the unique challenges of marrying into the royal family and adapting to a life of constant public scrutiny. I remember the first time Granny showed me her jewelry collection, Catherine said, her voice soft with memory. She told me that each piece had its own story, its own role to play in the theater of monarchy. She said that wearing them wasn't about personal adornment but about connecting with all the women who had carried these symbols before us. William squeezed her hand gently, remembering his own conversations with his grandmother about the responsibility that came with royal inheritance. Queen Elizabeth II had always emphasized that privilege must be balanced with service, that every gift from the crown came with obligations to the people and to the institution itself. As the formal presentation concluded and they prepared to leave Windsor Castle, Catherine carried with her not just incredibly valuable jewelry but a deeper understanding of her place in the continuing story of the British monarchy. The tiaras represented more than beautiful objects, they were symbols of continuity, responsibility, and the trust that King Charles was placing in her to carry forward his mother's legacy. The drive back to Adelaide Cottage was filled with quiet conversation about the implications of what had just happened. Catherine understood that when she wore these pieces publicly, she would be making a statement about her role as the future queen consort, about the monarchy's confidence in the next generation, and about the seamless transition of traditions from one era to the next. Word of King Charles's decision would soon spread throughout royal circles and, eventually to the public, sparking discussions about royal succession, family dynamics, and the evolving nature of the monarchy. Some would see it as a natural recognition of Catherine's growing importance within the royal family. Others might wonder about the implications for Camilla and the traditional protocols surrounding royal inheritance. But, for Catherine, the moment represented something more personal than public speculation or royal politics. It was a connection to a woman she had deeply admired, a tangible link to Queen Elizabeth II's guidance and wisdom, and a reminder of the responsibilities that came with the extraordinary life she had chosen when she married William. As she carefully placed the tiara boxes in the secure area of their home, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young woman meeting her boyfriend's grandmother for the first time to a future queen consort entrusted with the monarchy's most precious symbols, her path had been marked by gradual growth, careful learning, and the development of a deep respect for the institution she would one day help to lead. The late Queen's tiaras would sparkle again at state dinners, diplomatic receptions, and formal ceremonies. But they would also carry forward the memory of a remarkable sovereign and the hopes of a monarchy preparing for its future with confidence in the next generation's ability to honor the past while embracing the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead.